Wicks, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in private practice. I work with trauma and families, but I've also had the great honor of working with women at Simonka Place as a therapist there. So this is near and dear to my heart and very personal. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma today, which isn't your typical lunch topic, but hang on for the ride with me. Imagine that you've had this worst day possible, like Sam and Allie described. Imagine that you've got kids in tow depending on you, like Sam said, that you have to be the strong one, but you're falling apart inside too. Your couch time has ended. Maybe you've been given room in a storage shed to stay with your kids, but it's getting too cold. Or maybe somebody's boyfriend came on the scene and said, she can't live with us anymore, and you gotta go. But now you've got no resources, you've got nothing left, you've had no money, you've got no childcare, so how do you get a job? You've given all your food stamps to the people you've lived with, so you've got no way to feed these children. It's incredibly vulnerable and scary. And you walk in the doors of Simonka Place. We think, oh, that'd be a great relief. But it's also a lot of shame and a lot of fear and a lot of terror, and that changes the brain. So why does homelessness happen? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Some of them are here on the screen. Frankly, a lot of women need help and support. After fleeing domestic violence situations or fleeing unsafe places, there's just nobody to help for childcare. A lot of women come from family systems that are struggling also, so there aren't grandparents that can watch the grandkids while they go to work. We've got childcare issues, we've got job loss, because you're gonna lose your job if you don't have childcare. So that's a big struggle. Obviously, we all know about drug and alcohol issues that play into this. Breakups, maybe you had a partner for a while and they kicked you out on the street with no notice, no way to plan. All of a sudden, it just ended. Mental health challenges can play into homelessness for sure. Boundary issues. A lot of women, we tend to be kind and hospitable, and a lot of women invite people into their home, not knowing who's safe and who's not, because the measuring stick on safe has been broken. And they have to flee their own homes because they've invited unsafe people into their home. Domestic violence obviously plays a role in this too. These are just a handful of things. I often thought I could write a book that there's 101 ways to become homeless, and there are. But these are some of the things that we see quite often. As you can imagine, all of that creates trauma. So every single person who enters the doors of Simonka Place has extensive trauma. What does this mean? Well, let's talk about the structure of the brain for a minute, because this becomes really important as we understand the cycle of homelessness and why this keeps happening. The brain actually changes when we encounter trauma. We don't just have hard feelings that we need to get over, right? We don't just have these things that we have to deal with and just kind of come to terms with and set boundaries with our family and we move on. No, our brain actually changes with trauma. So you can imagine too, that slide I just showed you before, if you've got a pileup of those issues, you've got mental health issues, you've got drug and alcohol issues, you've been through domestic violence, you can imagine the levels of trauma on the brain. And what happens is our prefrontal cortex, which is the front of our brain, starts to shrink. This is a problem, because this is where we make logical decisions. This is where we can plan our future. This is where we can think through the next steps. And that gets smaller. The hippocampus also shrinks. And this is an area of the brain that's responsible for differentiating between past and present. So you can imagine when somebody comes into Simonka Place, they've already been bouncing around place to place to place to place, and somebody says, well, you can stay here for a minute or a while. Whew, brain goes, this one's temporary too. I don't know what to do. So that part of the brain doesn't know the difference between safe and unsafe. It doesn't know the difference between past trauma and current trauma. This is what we call triggers. I'm sure you guys have all heard about them. If you haven't, I'm sure you've seen it on Facebook Reels or TikTok, right? We all get triggered. But this is what a trigger is. Our brain can't differentiate between the two. And then our amygdala, our hindbrain, actually gets bigger. This is the part of our brain that triggers fight, flight, freeze, and there's a fourth one now, and that's called fawning. This is the people-pleasing behavior. And so that part of the brain gets bigger. And so when we have trauma, the back part of our brain gets real big, and we can't think straight. We just go into reactive mode. I often taught this at Simonka Place, their fancy brain and your freak-out brain, so we can keep it real simple, right? We did all the nerd words, and now we're going into the stuff we can actually remember. So we've got our fancy brain in the front of our head. We've got our freak-out brain in the back of our head. And what happens with trauma is the freak-out brain lights up. And it's almost like an on-off toggle switch. We can't use the front of our brain if the back of our brain is lit up. And so you can imagine, with the back of our brain, this freak-out brain getting bigger and more activated, the more trauma we go through, the less we're able to use our prefrontal cortex and make logical decisions. Can you imagine the conundrum? And if you're getting triggered all the time, because you're staying in unsafe after unsafe, temporary after temporary, lack of support, lack of resources situations, the poor front of our brain is going to keep getting smaller, and we're going to not be able to make good decisions. It's not a lack of trying. It's literally a brain structure problem, and it's not these women's fault. So what we're looking for, we all want life change. That's why we're here today. We want women's lives to change. We want the hope. But we've got to get through a few stages to get there. And with this trauma brain, it's real tough to get there. It's going to take some time. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and some of you might have seen it in an intro to psychology class somewhere along the way or some kind of science class. But it holds true that we need physiological safety and emotional and intellectual safety before we can advance into fancy life change. And what women are coming into the doors with they need this physiological and emotional safety. That's what we can provide the minute they walk in the door. But we need some time for that to sink in, for the brain to calm down, for the woman's body to recognize that she's in a safer space and to not be on high alert. Because when we're working with those first two layers of that triangle, we're just on fight or flight mode all the time. And if we don't have secure housing, we don't have a secure way to feed our kids, we're always going to be stuck on those bottom two levels, and life change isn't going to be able to happen. This is the hope of Simonka Place, is that we can get to those higher levels of growth and change. Now, is this even possible to change the brain? Yes. Yes. Back in the olden times, we used to think the brain was static, that once we got to about 25 years old, it was cemented in stone. There was nothing we could do about it. But we know now that the brain is neuroplastic. It changes all the time. We've got these cool little neurons that look kind of like spider webs that connect over new thoughts and ideas all the time. But this takes a lot of time and a lot of repetition to get those new neurons to disconnect from trauma and reconnect over safety. And this is what we're going for, but there's hope. And again, that's why we're here today. This takes a lot of time. You can imagine all these little wires in our brain. If anybody in here is an electrician, our brains are a lot like what you do. It has to rewire. These electrical impulses they have to find each other over these new ideas. And you can imagine that might take some time. And the beauty of Simonka Place in the NLF, the New Life Fellowship program, is we do have some time. But there's been challenges to that for women and families. The facilities are challenging to be in when you're a mom with kids. And so we want to be able to invest in the facility to create better space so that we can have more time with these women. One of the challenges I saw often in the program with women is there's just no space to have privacy. So right now, moms are rooming with other moms. And you might be like, well, that's not that bad. Okay, remember back when your kids were babies. And you have a baby screaming all night long with a 10-year-old who's got to get up and go to school on the other side of the room belonging to another mom. You've got the baby screaming over here. You've got the other mom telling you how to be a better parent because she wants your baby to be quiet. You've got that mom telling you to shut up because you're doing your best. Like, it's a challenge. There's no space for privacy. There's no space to discipline your child without the entire building watching and telling you how to do it. And as a result of this, women don't stay long with kids in our building. And this might sound kind of luxurious, but it's not. You've already got trauma brain. You've already been through a million challenges. You already carry the shame of feeling like you haven't done well for your children. And now we're under this pressure cooker in this facility trying to make things happen. We need time with these women. You can see if they leave the building fairly quickly, how this cycle will just continue and continue and continue because we don't have time for that neuroplasticity, for those neurons to rewire over these new connections. We want time and we want space that can nurture these women, that can create a healing environment so that we can reduce trauma, help regrow the front of our brain, the fancy part of our brain, so that then they can plan the future. We can open up new ideas. We can open up possibility. And we see that as we're sitting with women. The longer we have with them, the more this opens up. The more the brain gets out of fight or flight mode and gets into real thinking mode. It's very exciting. So Kathy and I were sitting down and kind of dreaming. Kathy, the director of Simonka, we're sitting around dreaming like, what could make this happen? What could we do? Well, we need some improved building spaces so that women can be with their children and their children alone, where children can have private space to nap with their own family, where we don't have competing age groups kind of in all sorts of strange needs mixed together in one room, where you'd have privacy just to interact as a family. We need some new in-house resources like childcare, because as you can imagine, like I said, it's really hard to find a job or get your GED or do what you need to do. Even go to one interview can be impossible when you don't have childcare. We want all this because we want moms to be able to join the New Life Fellowship program so that they can stay for a long, extended time and learn what they need to learn and do what they need to do and heal these ways so that we can break that cycle like Sam and Allie have been working so hard on doing for their lives. One of the really neat partnerships that Simonka Place has, I don't know if everybody knows about it, is with JD Health and Wellness. There's some of their staff over here at the table. And it's a new-ish addition to the facility where we have in-house primary medical care and in-house mental health therapy. And the therapists and the doctors work hand in hand. This is life-changing, but all that takes time too. Because as most of us know, just popping a pill isn't going to get it done. We're going to need time to work with these women. All of this is we're working towards peace. We're working towards hope. We're working towards an ability for the women to see a new future for themselves in all of this. Once we get past these basic needs of safety and security, we can move up into love and belonging, which then builds on self-esteem. And this is exactly what the New Life Fellowship program is all about. We want to move these women up this triangle into these more growth areas and growth spaces so that they don't have to keep revisiting trauma in their lives. And this is what we call life change. And this is why we're here today. So now imagine that you're a mom who has had an extended time at Simonka, has been able to find peace, rest, healthcare, education, spiritual growth, all the things she needs to be able to provide for her children. You can imagine that this actually happens, and it does every day. And we're all here to decide what part we want to play in this change. Thank you.